A Russian missile strike over the weekend at an apartment complex in the southeastern Ukrainian city of Dnipro exposed a weakness in Ukraine's air defenses, just as many fear more brutal Russian attacks are on the horizon. The Dnipro strike killed 45 people, including 6 children, and injured another 79 people in one of the most devastating attacks on Ukraine's civilian population since Moscow's invasion nearly a year ago. Russia has targeted critical infrastructure and energy grids in Ukraine with strikes since October, hoping to cow the Ukrainian people into submission after facing numerous setbacks in the war. In the Dnipro strike, however, Ukraine says it was completely unable to stop the missile that hit the apartment complex because it lacked the defense capabilities to intercept it. The deadly incident, just days after the Kremlin's appointment of a new commander to oversee the war, is leading to concerns that a more desperate Russia will increasingly carry out such strikes and Ukraine will struggle to defend against them. After the strike, a Kremlin spokesperson said Russia does not target residential areas and falsely attributed blame for the attack on Ukrainian air defenses, according to the Kyiv Post. The UK Defence Ministry said the Dnipro strike was part of a weekend barrage of missiles targeting power grids and not a direct assault on the multi-story apartment complex, noting the Kh-22 missile used in the January 14 attack is notoriously inaccurate. Ukrainian officials on Monday said they do not possess a defense system capable of downing Russia's Kh-22s, a Soviet-era long-range missile designed to strike ships and aircraft. Ukraine's Air Force Command said in a Facebook post that Russia has fired more than 210 of the missiles since the war began and Ukraine has shot down none of them. According to analysts, Kyiv is physically capable of shooting the missiles down, but they are extremely hard to track. The Kh-22 can reach more than 3,000 miles per hour once fired from Russia's Tu-22 M3 bomber planes. The missile type, equipped with a conventional warhead, has been used in past strikes, including one on a shopping mall in the city of Kremenchuk in June that killed around 20 people. Yuri Sak, an advisor to Ukraine's defense secretary, said Kyiv needs the Patriot missile defense system or a SAMT, a defense system co-owned by France and Italy, to effectively take the missiles down. The US and Germany are each providing Ukraine with one Patriot defense system, and American troops are training Ukrainian personnel on the missile system at Fort Sill in Oklahoma. But Sak said Ukraine will undoubtedly need more of the Patriots. Others cautioned that while more air defense systems were good, they can only do so much, arguing Ukraine also has to be effective in responding to the attacks. Russia is reportedly running low on ammunition and inventory, leading to questions regarding if the Kremlin has the ability to continue the strikes. But Sak said Russia is continuing to produce more missiles, and with its existing stockpile, the Kremlin could, at any given moment, conduct 2 or 3 mass strikes. That evidence is also supported by other analysts, who estimate Russia could continue the attacks with the current munitions supply through at least the summer. The Dnipro attack led to an outpouring of grief from Ukraine, even in a country already beleaguered by war and death. If Russia is indeed ramping up for a major offensive by March, as Ukraine alleges, the invading forces will confront new and more potent weapons supplied by the West. The Netherlands became the 3rd country to pledge air defense help to Ukraine through Patriot surface-to-air systems, as Prime Minister Mark Rutte told President Joe Biden during an Oval Office meeting Tuesday, "We have the intention to join what you are doing with Germany on the Patriot project." Rutte told reporters his country was even more determined to support Ukraine after the Russian missile strike on a building in Dnipro that killed more than 40 civilians over the weekend. More aid is coming in other areas. The United Kingdom has vowed to deliver 14 Challenger 2 tanks as part of a larger weapons package while trying to persuade other allies to step up with advanced military equipment. France and Poland have committed to sending modern tanks, and they're among the nations pressing Germany to contribute its sophisticated Leopard 2 tanks or at least grant other countries permission to supply them to Ukraine. That's a requirement because the tanks are made in Germany. Army General Mark Milley, the top U.S. military officer, met for the first time Tuesday with his Ukrainian counterpart, General Valery Zaluzhnyi, near the Ukraine-Poland border. Ukrainian First Lady Alina Zelenska urged world leaders and corporate executives at the World Economic Forum's gathering in Davos, Switzerland, to use their influence to counter the worldwide harm from Russia's war in Ukraine, such as food shortages. Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu said Tuesday that his country's military would increase its forces from 1.15 million service members to 1.5 million by 2026. He also pledged to boost the number of training grounds, including in the new territories of Russia, apparently Ukraine. Amid pressure to supply Ukraine with advanced tanks, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz named regional official Boris Pistorius defense minister. Pistorius replaces Christine Lambrecht, who resigned Monday under heavy criticism for the country's hesitant response to the war in Ukraine. Deputy Secretary of State Wendy Sherman and other U.S. officials met in Kyiv with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky on Monday. They reiterated Washington's strong and steadfast commitment to Ukraine, State Department spokesperson Ned Price said. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov declined to comment Tuesday on the Ukrainian intelligence service's claim that Russian President Vladimir Putin ordered his military chiefs to complete the seizure of the industrial Donbas region of eastern Ukraine by March. National Security Council spokesman John Kirby said in a CNN interview Tuesday that the Donbas is not all Putin aims to capture. Death toll rises in Russian missile strike at Dnipro apartment building. 6 children were among at least 45 people killed when a Russian missile slammed into a central Ukraine apartment building last weekend, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said Tuesday. National Police Chief Igor Klimenko said search and rescue operations have been completed at the site of the 9-story building that housed about 1,700 people in Dnipro. 16 children were among the 79 people injured, 28 of them hospitalized, 10 in serious condition, Klimenko said in a Facebook update. Nearly 20 people remained missing, including 4 children. Some people were trapped on upper floors, and some signaled for help with lights on their cell phones. About 400 people lost their homes. The missile that hit the Dnipro apartment building Saturday was one of dozens fired by Russia targeting Ukraine infrastructure and probably hit the apartment building by accident, the British Defence Ministry said Tuesday in its latest assessment of the war. An AS-4 Kitchen large anti-ship missile, launched from a Russian bomber, was the likely culprit, the assessment said. Similar weapons have been responsible for other civilian mass casualties, including a strike on a Kremenchuk shopping center in June that killed at least 20 people. Ukraine official resigns after mistakenly blaming building strike on air defense. A high-level Ukrainian official has resigned after erroneously saying the Russian missile that struck the Dnipro building Saturday exploded and fell after the Ukrainian air defenses shot it down, a report Russia promptly seized to escape blame for an attack that killed dozens of civilians. Presidential advisor Alexei Arestovich said he made a serious mistake in his remarks in an interview late Saturday, which caused an outcry. The Ukrainian Air Force immediately disputed his statement, saying the country's military is not capable of downing Russia's Kh-22 supersonic missiles, the type that hit the apartment building. Since the beginning of Russia's military aggression, more than 210 missiles of this type have been launched on the territory of Ukraine, the Air Force said. Not one was shot down by means of anti-aircraft defense. Ukraine came a step closer on Tuesday to winning the fleet of modern battle tanks it hopes could turn the course of the war against Russia, after the West's big holdout Germany said this would be the first item on its new defense minister's agenda. The head of Russia's Wagner mercenary group said on Tuesday that a French Foreign Legion soldier had been found dead in eastern Ukraine, and posted an image of what appeared to be his identity documents. A former commander of Russia's Wagner mercenary group who fought in Ukraine said he has fled to Norway and is seeking asylum in fear for his life after witnessing the killing and mistreatment of Russian prisoners brought to the front line. Ukrainian presidential advisor Alexei Arestovich tendered his resignation on Tuesday after a public outcry over comments he made suggesting a Russian missile that killed at least 41 people in the city of Dnipro had been shot down by Ukraine. Russia said on Tuesday that it would make major changes to its armed forces from 2023 to 2026, promising to shake up its military structure after months of setbacks on the battlefield in Ukraine. Russian-installed authorities in Ukraine's eastern Donetsk region said on Tuesday they were in control of Soledar, repeating their earlier claim about the salt mining town where intense fighting has taken place. NATO surveillance planes were due to arrive in Romania on Tuesday to bolster the military alliance's eastern flank and help monitor Russian military activity. More than 9,000 civilians, including 453 children, have been killed in Ukraine since Russia's invasion last February, a senior Ukrainian presidential aide said on Tuesday. Diplomacy. Germany's allies on Tuesday ramped up the pressure on Chancellor Olaf Scholz to allow the supply of German-made Leopard tanks to Ukraine. The Kremlin said on Tuesday that another meeting between President Vladimir Putin's foreign spy chief and U.S. Central Intelligence Agency Director William Burns would be useful but gave no indication when it might happen. The head of the UN nuclear watchdog said he hoped to make progress on a safe zone deal around the Russian-controlled Zaporizhzhia plant in Ukraine, but stressed it was a tough negotiation. Russia should halt its efforts to recruit Serbs to fight alongside its Wagner paramilitary group in Ukraine, Serbian President Aleksandar Vučić said. Russian and Belarusian flags have been banned from the Melbourne Park precinct during the Australian Open after a complaint from the Ukraine ambassador to the country. Ukraine ends search for survivors in Dnipro, death toll hits 44. Ukraine called off search and rescue operations on Tuesday at the rubble of an apartment building in the eastern city of Dnipro where at least 44 people were killed in a Russian missile attack. The state emergency service said 20 people were still unaccounted after Saturday's attack and that the 44 confirmed dead included 5 children. 39 people had been rescued from the rubble and a total of 79 had been hurt, it said. The attack was the deadliest for civilians since the start of a 3-month Russian missile bombardment campaign. Regional authorities said on Tuesday the body of a child was among the last pulled out of the rubble. Ukraine says the apartment building was struck by a Russian Kh-22 missile. Russia, which invaded Ukraine last February, said its wave of missile strikes on Saturday did not target any residential buildings. Russia is suffering from profound problems with its dysfunctional long-range missiles, Britain's Ministry of Defense has said. Officials said there is evidence from Ukraine that the Kremlin's missile systems are highly likely struggles to identify targets. The update comes after a Russian missile hit an apartment building in Dnipro, killing at least 40 people and injuring multiple others. Saturday's attack on Dnipro's building has claimed 40 civilian lives despite Russia's claims that its attack on Ukraine did not target civilians. The victims included 3 children, officials said. Volodymyr Zelensky has said that Ukrainian authorities in the security service have already started gathering information about Russian military involved in preparing and in carrying out this strike on an apartment building in Dnipro. He added, "There is no doubt, every person guilty of this war crime will be identified and brought to justice." The UN's Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights has totaled the civilian casualties in the Ukraine war to more than 18,000 since the first day of Russian invasion in its latest update. As of Sunday, the top UN office has recorded 18,358 civilian casualties in the country, out of which 7,031 people have been killed and 11,327 injured. A total of 7,031 killed, 2,784 men, 1,875 women, 177 girls, and 221 boys, as well as 35 children and 1,939 adults whose sex is yet unknown, the UNHCR said yesterday. It added, a total of 11,327 injured, 2,472 men, 1,764 women, 240 girls, and 325 boys, as well as 262 children and 6,264 adults whose sex is yet unknown. In Donetsk and Luhansk regions, the UN authorities have recorded 9,853 casualties, 4,102 killed and 5,751 injured. Dnipro was in mourning today after the Russian attack alleged to have killed 40 civilians and left 75 wounded, including 14 children. A serviceman in uniform laid flowers and sobbed, clutching his head in grief next to an impromptu shrine to the dead at a bus stop across the street from a gaping hole where the 9-story apartment block had stood, Reuters reported. "We all live in buildings like this one and we all imagine what if it happened to us. It is awful," Paulina, a 28-year-old resident of the neighborhood, told the news agency. Russia claimed it was not to blame for the destruction in Dnipro as it was caused by Ukrainian air defenses. Kyiv says the apartment building was hit by a Russian ship-to-ship missile, a type that Ukraine does not have the capability to shoot down. The death toll from a Russian missile strike in city of Dnipro rose to 40 today, with dozens more missing, making it the deadliest civilian incident of Moscow's 3-month campaign of firing missiles at cities far from the front line. Dozens of people were rescued from the rubble, including 6 children. "We are fighting for every person," Mr. Zelensky said in a televised address. Speaking later in his nightly video address, Mr. Zelensky said the Dnipro attack underscored the need to speed up decisions on arms supplies and coordinate all the efforts of the coalition defending Ukraine and freedom. Ukraine's infrastructure could collapse at any second as Russia's sporadic missile attacks along with freezing winter temperatures put local authorities under increasing strain, Kyiv's mayor has warned. Vitaly Klitschko and his brother Vladimir told Reuters that Ukraine's Western allies had to speed up deliveries of air defense systems capable of downing Russian missiles. Belarus's exiled opposition leader has said she does not think Russia will launch an offensive on Ukraine from her country after the two nations began military drills, but warned Moscow could launch more missile strikes from its allies' territory. Moscow and Minsk started joint military exercises on Monday, triggering fears in Kyiv and the West that Moscow could use its ally to launch a new ground offensive in Ukraine. Svetlana Tsikhanouskaya told Reuters that she believed the drills aimed to scare the Belarus people about the possibility of war and make President Alexander Lukashenko appear to be doing everything to avoid conflict. The UK is doubling down its training of Ukrainian soldiers on British soil, the Defence Secretary has said. Ben Wallace told the Commons, doubling down on the success of our basic training of Ukrainian military in 2022 in the United Kingdom, we are also now increasing this number this year to a further 20,000. Britain will send hundreds more armored vehicles to Ukraine, including Bulldog vehicles and Challenger 2 tanks, the Defense Secretary has told MPs. More than 7,000 civilians have been killed in Ukraine since Russia invaded its neighbor last February, the Office of the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, OHCHR, said on Monday. The UN Rights Office said it had confirmed 7,031 civilian deaths but believes actual casualty tolls are considerably higher given the pending corroboration of many reports and the inaccessibility of areas where intense fighting is taking place. Most of the recorded civilian deaths occurred in government-held areas of Ukraine, 6,536 compared with 495 recorded in Russian-held areas. OHCHR did not attribute responsibility for the deaths. Ukraine says the numbers of civilians killed could run into the tens of thousands. Both countries deny targeting civilians. Ukraine has brought back 125 children who were illegally taken to Russia from the temporarily occupied territories. In total, Russia kidnapped almost 14,000 Ukrainian children. Quote, "We have managed to identify and verify the data of almost 14,000 children who were kidnapped and deported by the Russian army, and unfortunately, we can say that we only managed to bring 125 of them home. It appears that it is very little, but for each one, the fate of the Ukrainian child, such an important child, is at stake." Since the beginning of the full-scale invasion, Russian troops have killed 456 children in Ukraine, Gerasimchuk emphasized. According to Gerasimchuk, 897 children have been injured due to the full-scale Russian invasion of Ukraine. Quote, "Even if the body was not hurt by the bombings of the Russian Federation, the war affected every Ukrainian child. More than 7.5 million Ukrainian children, who lived on the territory of our country before the beginning of the full-scale invasion by the Russian Federation into Ukraine, suffered. Russians deported more than 13,000 Ukrainian children to the Russian Federation," the Children's Ombudsman said. Over 15 to 16 January, Russian troops hit Soledar, Donetsk Oblast, 134 times. 259 attacks with the use of various calibers of tubed and rocket artillery took place, 38 combat engagements occurred. The enemy hit Soledar 134 times. Russia is also trying to conduct offensive actions on the Avdiivka front. Cherevati also said that both Marines and mercenaries of Wagner PMC, which mostly consists of former convicts, are fighting on the East Front from the Russian side. According to him, Russians attack with the use of small infantry groups and try to exhaust the defenses of Ukraine's military. Hanna Maliar, Deputy Minister of Defense of Ukraine, has called on people not to spread unverified information about the battle for Soledar. The Russian Defense Ministry has made an official statement about the capture of the city of Soledar in Donetsk Oblast. The General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine has reported that the battles for Soledar, Donetsk Oblast, continue, despite the statement of the Russian Ministry of Defense about the alleged capture of the city. In Ukraine, fighting around the eastern frontline city of Bakhmut remains intense with both sides determined to hold their ground. To advance, Ukraine desperately needs tanks of the type the UK has just announced it will send. Poland is poised to send a squadron of German-made Leopard 2 tanks, but that needs Berlin's approval. At the World Economic Forum, the Polish president expressed hope it would come soon. Fierce fighting rages in Soledar, Russian eyes fixed firmly on Bakhmut. Ukraine holding out in cities of Soledar and Bakhmut amid fierce fighting. In another development, the UN's atomic agency, the IAEA, has finally started deploying experts at nuclear sites to ensure their safe operation. The idea is to leave a group of experts behind in each location to support Ukrainian experts. Ukraine has a total of 4 nuclear power plants with 16 reactors. One of them in Zaporizhia, the biggest in Europe, was taken over by Russian forces in the first months of the war and remains under their control. Ukraine also needs economic support, and that is what EU finance ministers have been discussing. They're aiming to find ways to secure long-term, sustainable financial backing for the war-ravaged country. Over 9,000 civilians, including 453 children, have been killed in Ukraine since Russia's invasion last February, a senior Ukrainian presidential aide said on Tuesday. We have registered 80,000 crimes committed by Russian invaders and over 9,000 civilians have been killed, including 453 children, Andriy Yermak, head of the Ukrainian presidential staff, said at the World Economic Forum in the Swiss resort of Davos. The Office of the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights said on Monday that more than 7,000 civilians had been killed in Ukraine since Russia invaded. A senior Ukrainian official blamed Russia on Tuesday for carrying out the bulk of more than 2,000 cyber attacks on Ukraine in 2022, speaking at a news conference that he said was itself delayed because of a cyber attack. The official, Yuri Skygul, told reporters that his live-streamed conference was forced to start 15 minutes late because of a Russian hack, though he did not elaborate or present evidence for his assertion. All that the Russian hackers could do was to delay the start of our briefing by 15 minutes, said Skygul, head of the State Service for Special Communications and Information Protection. During the news briefing, he said Ukraine had been hit by 2,194 cyber attacks in 2022, with 1,655 of those coming after Moscow's February 24 invasion. Government institutions sustained 557 cyber attacks last year, he told reporters, laying the blame for the bulk of the attacks at Moscow's door.